I'm moving on to texturing my model. Before baking the maps, I spaced out all the subtools separately from each other. This way, there won't be any artifacts at the intersections of the model's parts during the baking process. Let me show you how this is done. Here I have both the low poly and high poly models. I created a simple animation to separate the parts of these models. The idea is to move all the intersecting parts far enough apart from each other. This way, each subtool has its own space, and during the baking process it won't affect nearby elements. I'll bake the maps in this position in Substance Painter. We just need to wait a bit. And the baking is done! Everything went great. There are a few minor errors between the fingers, but that's easy to fix. The important thing is that the beard and clothing turned out fine. Now, using the Edit menu and Project Configuration, I'll replace this model for baking with the normal version. I carefully check the baked maps once again for any errors and rename the texture sets to keep the project organized. Now I'd like to show you the color palette I'm planning to use for this project. I really love the shades and their combination in the flowers on the left. I also feel that these blue tones will look great on this character. The stone textures in this image have really inspired me. I think they'll work well for the character's skin, giving it some unevenness while still maintaining a stylized look. Here, I have a set of textures. These fabric textures are seamless, and I'm going to use them to add roughness to the fabric. The colored textures are mainly for inspiration, while the black and white ones might be used as masks. Alright, now I can start texturing my character. At this stage, my process is almost always the same. First, I try to choose a base color for each part. This helps me understand the color combinations, see the overall look of the character, and set the tone for the model and the scene as a whole. You might notice that I spend quite a bit of time on this step. From my experience, setting the base colors for the entire model makes the rest of the work much easier and minimizes mistakes. You know, I'm pretty lazy, so I always try to find ways to work quickly but with good quality, so I don't have to redo things later, because, well, laziness. Right now I'm trying to find an interesting texture for the sleeves. I'm using a fill layer with a slight height value. My goal is to choose textures that keep the character's stylized look intact. Now that I'm satisfied with the sleeve texture, I want to apply it to the rest of the robe. To do this, I save everything as a smart material and transfer it to the torso section. The next step is to add texture to the clothing. Please note that all the textures and colors I use come from the pre-prepared set that I showed you at the beginning of the video. At this stage I am finishing the texturing of my character. I think he turned out quite cute. Now let's move on to the texturing of the stone. Unfortunately, for some reason, the video of the process didn't record, so I'll just show you how the textures were created. In fact, the stone textures are very simple. So, the first layer is just a normal map that I created directly in ZBrush. Next, I have a base color layer. There's nothing here besides color and roughness. Following that are small color splotches. For the fill layer color, I used the same color as the base layer but made it a bit lighter. This layer has a black mask. Here's a fill layer with the grunge dusty powder wide texture. After that, I applied blur and directional blur filters. The next layer essentially adds minor imperfections and dents. I used the grunge stained spots texture with a small height value. Then I applied blur slope and sharpen again. The next layer is essentially a copy of the previous one, just with a different color and texture. Next is a layer that highlights the edges of the stone. I used the mask editor for this. You can see the settings on the screen. Now we have a layer for grass, although I think it looks more like moss. I used the ambient occlusion generator with low values and the same blur slope. The light moss layer is a copy of the previous layer with slightly adjusted settings. And the topmost layer simulates water reflections. Since I'm going to place this stone in water, I pre-painted some water highlights. Let's move on to the large round stone. Again, we have the normal map and base color layers. The layer with spots is much simpler than that of the large stone since it's not required here. The moss layer is simply copied from the large stone. And the top layer is an image layer that I created in Midjourney. Essentially, it's just a black mask on which I painted using the previously created images as stencils. The small flat stone has just 3 layers: the base color layer, the spot layer copied from the round stone, and the highlight layer. You can see the settings for each on the screen. Now let's talk about the small shell on top. The most interesting aspect here is the layer with the pattern. I used a golden color and applied a mask with the texture I used on the monk's clothing. The top layer is meant to emphasize the ridges of the shell. As I mentioned, the material for this stone is very simple and can be created quickly. In the next video, I'll show you how I created the cherry tree and set up its material in Unreal Engine. See you soon!